Hi, welcome back again to the Timber Worker channel. This week I'm just going to do a very quick video, basically just to show how 2 bits of ply along with a different saw blade to normal and my vinyl wrap table saw sled allows me to cut some box joints. So stick around and I will very quickly show you how it's done. So the observant amongst you will notice that I have now managed to get around to mounting my table saw actually into the workbench, and what I've done is I've extended the runners out from the table saw itself into the workbench, which just allows my sled to run further along, so otherwise it would stop when it got to there, which is still a good distance away from the actual blade, so not really any use to anyone. Now it all starts with one piece of ply, which is purely there as a backing that I can clamp onto the sled, a piece of 3mm ply board, and the reason why I've gone for 3mm is because I had this old table saw blade, which was a Freud that I picked up from a car boot sale for about 50p, which is an absolute bargain. Although saying that, it was completely covered in resin, and the first time I tried to use it, it practically burnt through the wood rather than actually cutting. But with a bit of clean up, that's worked out very well. So with the 3mm ply and a 3mm kerf, it just means that everything is going to be so much simpler. Now you can do this with any size saw blade and any size ply, or wood. You just have to make sure that the two things are exactly the same width. Now the way that I do it, or the way that I did it, is just to take 2 pieces, space those on the end, and just move the ply out so that it lines up there. And that's purely so that when I've actually finished, all that will happen is I can move this bit of ply up flush to the end of the table saw sled, and that should in theory mean that the new hole, the next hole that I cut, will line up perfectly and be spaced out correctly. I will obviously check it as we go through, but the theory's there and it worked the first time, so fingers crossed it will work again. Now this one, I'm actually going to set the depth just a little bit higher, and the reason for that is because I'm going to cut some thicker wood. Now this one is set to 12mm, which means that any wood 12mm thickness, I can just slot on, set the height, and go over, and that's perfect. I can't go any less than 12mm, otherwise the wood sits up from the ground, which is not good for safety. But although I don't need to go any higher, I've decided that I'm going to just go a slightly thicker piece, just so that when I'm cutting bits of wood like this one, then it's going to be a much easier, much smoother fit. Okay, so first thing to do, I need to set the height of the table saw. And again, I'm just going to use this bit here to line everything up. Now, I'll be honest, I'm tending to go just a smidgen over, which can then be taken care of in sanding, because I'd rather go cut slightly too far in, deal with it in the sanding, than not cut enough, and then have to do the whole process again. So that is just in the right place. I'm going to take my fresh board, which is already there, just get the 2 pieces, as we said, get those lined up. Now it doesn't need to be 100% accurate, and the only reason I'm doing it is just to make it look nicer. when I'm using it in the future, because ultimately as long as you move it along from the first cut the correct amount, you'll be absolutely fine. Now and I'm just going to put a clamp on here just to hold that in position. Always safety first. Okay, so that's the first piece cut. What you should see is that it's a very tight fit into here, which is exactly what you want. It wants to basically just go in with a small amount of force, and that way everything should be ideal when you come to do your final pieces. Now this is actually a little bit tighter than I was expecting, but nothing, a little whack won't help. Rubber mallet. Okay. Just gone in a little bit too far on the back there. Okay. Now the first time I did actually glue that in, but that is extremely sturdy. Now the theory goes, if I get this now lined up on the end there, I should, if I grab another piece of ply, those two things should line up perfectly. Yeah, now I can't move that over at all. And one thing I'm just trying to make sure of is that I do keep that at a right angle, because I don't want that curving off to the side through any pressure on the blade or from the blade. So yeah, that looks good. And then I'll clamp that down again. Take that one out of the way, and we'll just run that through. Okay, so that should now be ready just to take some bits of wood that sort of size through again and again. Now obviously another way to line it up is just very simply to, when you're clamping it on again, actually use the blade. So you'll always know that you are dead on accurate to the blade there. As I say, I just like it knowing that these two edges are lined up perfectly. That's just purely personal preference, nothing more than that. Now the battery's gone flat on my other camera, but I'm just going to very quickly show you how this works on some ply offcuts. I will at some point in the future be using it on some nice big thick chunks like this, as I said earlier, but because this isn't planed up, still quite rough, it's not square, I don't really want to do it on that because I just know it's not going to work out right. So I've got some nice bits of ply. I've already cut one end. Now I don't think ply is the best for this because, as you can see, it started to flake off on those already, but it will prove the concept. It just goes just very quickly, lines up like that. Yeah, and we can just make sure that's a nice right angle, put some glue in, job done, you've got yourself a box. Now I wouldn't normally cut that much extra through, because this is quite thin ply and it's just purely for show. I don't see any harm. You know, what I could do is run over that with a saw and then just sand it off, make it all nice and flush at the end as well if I needed to. So we will start on the other end and see how we go. Okay, so I think if we ignore the fact that there's bits of ply chipped off here, there and everywhere, because as I said, ply is not really the best tool, the best wood for the job. The principle is there, in that you take your two ends, which, because I noticed halfway through, when I got to the end of that one, I lined the next piece up against that one. Because you do that, then you should always get nice tight joins, which is never going to happen with this plywood. But yeah, so that lines up. You then get a 90-degree angle in there. Obviously chop those off, sand it back, then you're good to go. So a very quick way to make a box joint, just using scrap ply and a thicker blade than usual, but unfortunately, as I said earlier, this one is just seeming to completely smoke the workshop out, so I need a bit more clean up on that before I do this again. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon.